Thank you.
Okay, I beg your pardon. Yes, we are being recorded. I was saying that I am very, very impressed with this book because I love your style. I like the fact that you have taken us through a journey, your own journey. And as much time as we have, I would like to ask you not only about the flow framework itself, the detail, where you take us into detail. And that was actually quite I needed to concentrate more when I was reading, but also the big brush that you have taking us through the ages. And indeed, very, very recently, you wrote that when you were discussing these ages, and the turning points and all that, during the pandemic, you actually did make the statement that the pandemic itself has now brought that turning point for certain.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit of that, just because it is a statement sort of beyond the book. Is that still your belief 2 years ago?
Yeah. So I think, there have been in each of these, and I think I'm glad you put the slide up, right? This is a more recent slide of mine, as you said, Mik, that's in the book, where there have been these kind of macroeconomic or global changes that create catalysts, right? So what happened with the pandemic is that just that shift, things were already happening, but that shift to digital was accelerated. So I think there's different ways of looking at it. We won't really be able to have an exact sense till it's over, till we're further along, till several years down the road. But I think what I expected to happen in the course of the next 5 to 10 years happened in the course of a year, right? In terms of, and it's multiple things, right? That were driven by consumer behavior changing, by companies needing to provide digital experiences faster, by the companies who were prepared for that shift performing so much better, and their value and their growth being driven so much faster, while others fell further and further behind. So I think we've absolutely witnessed that happen. And it's really now, as in terms of being in this deployment period, it's back to the same thing the book talked about, is those companies that did so well, right? Those companies, you've had different examples, right? Just take travel, because that's just a obviously really interesting thing to think about in a pandemic. You've had companies who, this would be an interesting, I should think more through, because we can now actually have enough data on what happened on that. But if we think of travel, we had companies that were already set up for innovation. And this is what we see in this these installment periods, is that some companies have mastered in this case, digital and software. So you had an Expedia who was very quickly, in a matter of days, actually able to restructure its business, to scale up its cloud usage, and all those kinds of things. Then you had the more traditional companies, like say TUI Group, who use this opportunity as kind of their own turning point. And on the Project to Pride podcast, if you actually look for TUI, TUI, their CTO talks through the story. This was actually at the start of the pandemic, super interesting. But now they're at the back end of that, right? Where they actually use this opportunity to re-platform and to realign around product value streams and around cloud and around their digital platform. So they actually used this last two-year period. It's pretty amazing to do that, right? So they've gone through their transformation. And then you've got some that haven't, right? Some that have, and a number of them have gone bankrupt. Right, the most recent one last week. I guess it was Carnival Cruise. It was one of the cruise companies. So yeah, it's I think a pretty amazing thing, and it's not obviously in different parts of the economy. It applies differently. I think you mentioned, to your point, like automotive. That's one of the turning point could not be more pronounced.
Yeah,
and it's just fascinating, right? Like in the book, I was thinking about and describing how BMW was competing with Tesla. There's look at how far ahead Tesla is.
Yeah.
who, Elon Musk, was it 2 weeks ago, tweeted that the thing that people still don't understand is that Tesla is a software company. And it's not just how its cars function, it's how its plants function, it's how its logistics function, it's how it builds its own software, it's how it's able to create workarounds for chip shortages in its software, which no one else can do, which means they've been able to deliver more cars in the UK than almost anyone else in terms of new cars. And you saw what's happening with the Model 3 in the UK. So the pandemic, now, did the pandemic really catalyze Tesla? No, that was already happening. But I think we did see a lot of catalysts, just acceleration across the board. So yeah, I think we're now looking at we're staring at this deployment period.
You mentioned.
Go on, Himanshu.
I was saying that you mentioned automotive, and in the book we talk about the hardware and software as part of one value stream. What about, and this is one of the challenges that I am facing, is what about the manufacturing side of it? And I know you mentioned robots and all of that as Tesla's example, but for others who are still catching up, like Fords and the Nissans, how do we organize these value streams, and how do we take this business agility forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the bottom line is that and I've had some experiences with Ford as well, is they need to be organized around software platforms and value streams. So this is not to say they're going to change their what Ford would probably call their business value streams overnight, where they think of those as the lines, but that they need to do the kind of thing that BMW did, is like I say, this is our software portfolio, right? This is Ralph Valtram, who I mentioned at the end of the book. He now runs, previously he was doing IT, he now runs all plant software, right? So plant software plant software is really in BMW's words, it's a product domain for their software, just like car software is, just like autonomous is, just like internal IT applications are, just like mobility applications are, infotainment, like all those sorts of things. They're different product domains, each of which has their own product value streams. And the more that you apply product thinking instead of project thinking to those, you realize that, of course, the plant software is not a project to set up the software for this plant. It's a long-lived life cycle. You've got to think of it in terms of product life cycle. And you've got to think in terms of how do we optimize that, those long-lived product life cycles. Now, I think the good thing is that manufacturers already think that way. They think of their lines as having long-lived product life cycles. They think of their products as having long-lived product life cycles. This is why some of these things are actually easier for car companies. They've just not thought of the software as part of that. So they think of all the software as a project that's done, rather than something that needs to continually evolve. And it's actually easier to continually evolve, of course, than a production line. Yet they already think about continually optimizing production lines, right, over time within the physical constraints that they have. And in software, we've got way fewer physical constraints. So I think the key thing is to take that as more and more of how production works, whether it's physical or software production, to take that product and flow mindset to helping these organizations understand what their portfolio is, and just understand how to manage flow in that portfolio. So, and by the way, of course, like they're not going to get rid of projects overnight either. It's going to take them. They're going to have their software projects. They're going to have, and there are genuine projects. Like for Ford, Mach-E is or direct to consumer sales. Those are real projects, but they have to be supported by software products and platforms. So.
It was interesting in your book that you went to the Rolls-Royce and you saw differences there, and I'm intrigued as whether Rolls-Royce will change or whether what is quality will somehow remain in the hands of whatever the fix is. But they also have some nice ideas. I also, we do teach at the University of Westminster, me and Himanshu, and I do tell my students that in BMW, 50% of the software of the cost of the car is software, and I can look at their faces. Thank you for that, because they're very surprised. I did not know. I had not caught on, but
it's a good thing to get.
I use it now in my class and all that. And as Ian is observing in the chat, it appears he says that we are moving from the Toyota way of doing things to the Tesla way of doing things. And Tesla he has a lot of ideas because he understands software like modular building. He's building his factories in a modular manner. And that reminded me a lot of your knuckles and fingers in the beautiful BMW. I now want to visit BMW, and I'm not even a driver myself. But
I don't drive a BMW either, ironically. But I'll tell you that after reading the book, a lot more BMW executives, technology executives, visited the same plant, the Leipzig plant.
Indeed.
They had an influx of BMW people come to the plant.
Indeed, and I love the original example that you had with the aeroplane. Because you are in love with this Dreamliner. That is very much the technological supply comes through, and the fact that the software engineers were in the first flight or whatever, and the plane was wobbling and all that, and they had to quickly solve the problem while on the plane. I really wish, for example, and I think that is transferable to other software industries, in the sense that many times I am thinking that if my boss could see the work that his people are doing, he would understand where the bottlenecks really are, instead of just coming with pronouncements from above. And this this correction you're putting into agile, and the correction you're putting into Goldhar's work and all that on DevOps, I think are beautiful points. But we are project managers. This is the project management book club. So we would like to defend ourselves, or at least later on, if we do get a chance as such. But we do not wish, me and Himanshu, to monopolize the questions. Does anyone have a question that maybe has not been answered? Jonathan, will you go ahead with your question?
Yeah, I mean, I had a very kind of high-level general question. I was interested. I've enjoyed your book. I've not finished it yet, but I'm enjoying going through it. I was wondering if you maybe had some examples of where I work in a large enterprise where a lot of the work is internal and we're not delivering an end product for a customer. And I'm wondering if you've seen some examples of where a large enterprise has used the flow framework successfully and moved into more of a kind of product model.
I would guess that probably, if you look at all the value streams that have been out there deployed with the flow framework, deployed with our tools that TaskTop builds, where we get to see the data, I bet 70 to 80% of them are all internal and never see an external customer. Because most enterprises, as you're pointing out, just work on internal software and work on whether that's internal customer facing software, it's business partner facing software, it's platforms and APIs and data and AI. So I think the key thing is that this product thinking, the goal is it should apply to your entire internal portfolio. So I think that it's just a different customer, which means those product value streams need to be set up differently. But of course, the problem is if we think of and whatever the portfolio is, whether it's a new machine learning capability or it's a new HR system, if we think of it as just a project, and of course it can be funded by a project, we'll have a project to deploy, to onboard people onto it, but we need to think of it as having a product lifecycle, or chances are we won't have the early warning indicators that it's off track. So I think the key thing that I see is that and this is, by the way, where I think there's a really important distinction. I wish I talked about this a bit more in the book, but if you look at the Project to Product podcast with Dave Snowden, where he talks about the Cynefin framework, it's is that we need to apply these tools like product management, like some of the business agility, those kinds of frameworks, and know which tools to apply to which domain. So when we've got very ordered and simple domains, we can apply project management as a way of sort of optimizing resources and making sure we're meeting timeframes and planning dependencies, because we have such high certainty over what's coming in the future. But when we have, and then actually this zone stuff is related as well. When we have just a more dynamic market, or it's a large enterprise and there's so many moving pieces and technologies and organizational silos and these kinds of things, we're often working in a complex or a chaotic domain. And in those cases, you just need faster feedback loops, because things change, right? If you're building a bridge, the time it takes for concrete to harden doesn't change. If you're working with a large organization, a reorg or a change in leadership can change everything. So we need a fast ability to sense and to respond. And that's really the goal of measuring flow, is we understand not only what the plan was, but we've got feedback on the plan to see, is flow improving or is it getting worse? Is there a bottleneck that we didn't expect? And that's why I think that using flow metrics as and I should mention, by the way, Nick, back to your point, is one of the, this was a little surprising to me, not overly surprising, the degree to which PMOs and enterprise PMOs have embraced the flow framework, because it's just, you get faster, better visibility. So Nick, to your point, it's, this can work for other domains of knowledge work as well. I think it makes more sense when these are complex or chaotic domains, if using the Cynefin terms. But where software tends to be that, it's just that dynamic and changing that fast. My focus has been really just on software, not applying on the flow framework to other knowledge work domains. But the question does come up a lot. And I think that's really it. It just needs to be another tool in the box when you need faster feedback, when you need to drive innovation. And to the point on these investment zones, right? Productivity zones, that tends to be very ordered. You're sunsetting old systems, you're bringing on vendors. It's very simple. But as you go through the zones, things actually do get more complex and chaotic. And so you need faster and faster feedback. And that's why things like setting your flow time is so important, where in the productivity zone, you could have feedback cycles to the business or through project plans that are quarterly, right? On the incubation zone, it better be daily, or you don't know if you're learning quickly enough. So.
Indeed. Genti wants to ask a question.
Yes. Hello, Nick. Mik, apologies for not having the camera on.
No problem.
This is policy of the company. I don't know, whatever VPN uses. However, I'm very interested to see, this book was pre-COVID times, right? And in the hindsight, from what you have learned and how the world has changed, what are some of the things that, I don't know, if you will kind of review the book or have a new edition, what are some key highlights that you would point out that changed in the span of the time since the book was published? Is there, I don't know, something that really struck you or you want to approach it differently?
Yeah, I don't think, and this is related to the question I think Nick asked at the start, I don't think there's COVID because I think this was all happening. COVID just accelerated it. So I don't think there are any real changes if I were to write the book again from that point of view, other than, okay, it's happening a lot faster. Or at least there's this burst that the global pandemic has caused, and it's this major forcing function on these companies. I think the bigger changes since the book, so as I think ahead, and I do a fair amount of exploration on this with my guests on the Project to Product podcast, it has to do with organizational structures, right? The book project and the difference between investing in platforms versus investing in customer-facing products, and how you will do different metrics around that, and just more closely tying into business outcomes and business results, right? So I've done a lot of work in the last year on OKRs, how they can be, we've been using them at TaskTop for a decade, how they can be a very good tool to match up to flow metrics. And flow metrics were in fact designed around OKRs or similar approaches to measuring to measurement of business outcomes. So I think just, yeah, thematically, it's how to take these concepts and embed them in existing operating and business practices, right? Like OKRs. I think that's a really key thing. Like, existing project management operating models and so on. So I think those are the main things, and how to engage on these things. A lot of the learning I've been doing as we deploy the flow framework, engaging with the EPMO and engaging with the CFO on these things. So.
Right. Thanks.
No problem.
If I may ask a question, I've got here something strange on page 66, where the heading is why we need a new framework, and I totally agree that we need one, and yours is a beautiful one. By the time data is available to analysts and researchers, it will be too late. The winners and losers of the age of software will have gained enough market share that those applying management techniques of previous ages and those who are in previous ages will find it difficult or impossible to catch up. That is your statement that you make. But then you go on to say they won't be able to catch up without regulation or other forms of government intervention. Now, I have to ask you, are you in favor of regulation or not? And I ask because the person who you have quoted, Perez, that lovely lady, actually has a beautiful paper that says that this is an opportunity for ethical capitalism that comes once in a century. Yeah. And she is calling for regulation.
Yep.
Are you calling for regulation, or do you have an opinion on that? Because that is, while technological determinism is pushing us, there are some other forces, economical, political, social, that essentially don't like big monoliths, big monopolies.
Yeah. So, number one, I'm not an expert in this, and Carlotta is. So I more, but like I'm not a direct student of hers. I wish I could have studied directly under her, but I've had a lot of conversations with her and read pretty much all her work. So, so I think what I try to do is put out a framework and an approach that will help others become more innovative, right? So one thing that I believe to be true is that the regulations are way too slow. Now, China's different, obviously, right? What China's been doing to basically get its tech giants under control is really interesting, right? And it's something that the world can be learning from. Well, I'm not saying we should emulate it elsewhere, but we know that the only place that you can have tech giants, there's enough capital to drive them, are actually US and China. That's the only place they exist still. And that's something I was talking about in the book, that's unchanged. That's only accelerated, right? Their market cap, since I was shocked at how unequal the distribution of basically software production was becoming. It's just gotten, and this is partly through the pandemic, it's gotten even more unequal a lot faster than I imagined, and I was already raising an alarm how bad it was. So, so I think, yeah, there's two approaches to it. One is that, there's because the diffusion of innovation, that others get good at it, which I think is the faster path, and the other one is regulation. And I think both will be needed, because and this is an interesting thing to me since the book, it's become worse, not better. So there are differences, but but why is it that, I don't know, Stellantis is, or I don't know if I want to talk about cars or which industry, these transformations have been happening more slowly than they should be. And so the companies that are digital native are pulling further ahead than they should be able to. It is truly shocking to me that the automotive industry has been asleep at the wheel still. So to what Tesla's been doing under their noses with all the plans out there and all of this, right? And some of these things are innovators' dilemma, but some of these things are actually that these companies are not structured for innovation, for this kind of innovation. It's not that Elon, maybe Elon Musk is a genius, but where's like, how can everyone else be this far behind? So the point I was making on regulation is that unless if companies don't change, like the regulations won't slow it down enough, no matter what they are, because consumers want this. Right? Consumers want to bank online. Consumers want to have easy access to investments. Consumers want cars that have a great, as good an experience as their phones do for getting around. So yeah, I think we need regulation. I think we'll learn what effective regulation is, but I think no matter what, it'll be too slow. And I think a lot of Carlotta's ideas are great ideas.
Indeed, thank you. May I continue if nobody is asking a question? Let me, because we're also a book club, let me read a bit again out of your book. There is a lovely passage. You are at BMW, you are walking the lines on page 65. And first of all, thank you very much for taking us through that journey and the way that you put that journey into the book, and you don't put it in one place, but you actually build it up for us. I think it's beautiful as writing, let alone. And it's very nice to read. So Frank, the person who is with you, explains how complicated it would be to pull a car off the line at this point, because there are still miles of production line downstream. Every single workstation would need to compensate for the resequencing of the flow of parts. As such, many additional steps and processes are in place to avoid removing a car from the flow.
Yeah.
And so this is what he is telling. And then you think, yes, and you say, I am struck by the parallel between this and what happens when a software team breaks a build due to working out of sync with the latest code, or just how expensive the scenario is for a software organization. And here everything is synchronized and ensure continuous flow. And this beautiful step that you took from looking at vehicles, looking at manufacturing, looking at what is an old kind industry, or like almost 2 years before, and actually taking that idea and planting it into the future, I thought was lovely, and that suggests an inquisitive mind. And these epiphanies that you have brought us is to remind the readers that an epiphany doesn't just come by randomly and hit you from outside. You have to be thinking about it. You have to be concerned. You have to be conscious. And then, yes, boom, the aha moment or the epiphany does arrive. And I have to thank you as a book club, at least, for writing a lucid book for what is very, very complicated. And you're making it sound easier than it is, essentially. So I thought I'd throw that in before anyone else throws a question in. There was no actual question here, unless you want to share this feeling with us, these epiphanies. I'm not sure. Could I ask another question? This is like a free fall here. We've got Agile, and in the beginning of the book, you are sort of saying that Agile itself is now reminded an activity.
Jamie has a question.
Is he? We haven't lost Mik. Jamie has a question. I beg your pardon. Jamie, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Nicholas.
Yes,
yes, I had a question. So I'm new to this flow framework and also the value stream. And one of my customer is a large car manufacturer. So my question is, how can we start applying your value stream within your framework? Because in a large organization, yes, modeling or describe end-to-end process for one manufacturing site, it might take several months. So if you can give me some advice, how can I start applying this?
Okay, I think,
Yes.
as anticlimactic as it is, we have lost Mik. He had a power cut and I think he had a hard stop. So, Nick, do you want to answer that question?
No, because I was getting worried about Mik and I was not listening. Anyone else wants to answer the question? Sorry, I got confused because I wasn't sure. We have lost Mik, is that correct?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The question is basically, how can I start applying this value stream for a large organization? Because let's say that there's one manufacturing plant has several processes, and you go to another plant, so the process is slightly different. So how can you approach that you can
all right, so
give me some ideas?
So Jamie, all the examples in this book are for large organizations, you know, you probably weren't here at the beginning when Mik started talking about, and he's talking about long-lived value streams and long-lived products as well. So I suggest you give the book a chance, read it. All the examples in the book are about large organizations and how they have transformed their project ways of working, product mindset.
There are certain points that he makes clearly in the book when he's talking what are the flaws of agile, and I think one very quick one is the one that we have here, that when we are measuring success, we should throw away all these proxy measures of what is successful and not measure things from the agile point of view or from the DevOps point of view, but actually all the way to the value. Do they actually produce value? So the fact that we had many sprints and all that, which is a measure, it's a proxy measure, that is not really what we should be measuring. We should be measuring the link all the way to value. And I think that is the concept of the book. That is that if we look at it narrowly, and that is why project management, for example, gets a hit out of this book, that is, gets a knock out of this book, is precisely that if we are looking at things and like software, and software has an end, and when we deliver the software, that is it, that in itself is a huge mistake. Yes, we should actually go all the way to, I think, what project management now calls benefits and value. That is, project management itself, in my opinion, has evolved. Yes, so look at your bottlenecks and don't look at them as software bottlenecks, but actually as value bottlenecks if you are a DevOps person. Yes, and that mindset of sort of the door opens and closes nice and all that, and therefore we're doing well. The question is, so what? There are no customers. We don't gain more customers if this thing works better. Yes, but in order, then he moves on. That is the beauty. He moves on from that into saying that actually there is a lot of software created. He said it also today, a lot of software created for backdoor things, for security, for risk. Yes? And therefore you have to be also very conscious when you are changing a process, where you are in the chain, the value chain. Are you at the beginning of an innovation, or are you already the leader and trying to sell something? Yes, and just by knowing where you are, that other figure here that we had earlier on, will actually enable you to understand what to do. Yeah. So the first thing, if I am to give you one advice, from what I understand, I'm not the author, yes, but one advice is try and understand your company or that work that you're doing. In which of these zones are you? Are you in the performance zone, the productivity zone, the incubation zone? Yes, and just understanding that, which is another book in itself, yes, will then give you, and when he starts giving answers at the end of the book, it is beautiful to notice every now and then that essentially he says, if you are in the transformation zone, do this. If you are in the incubation zone, yes, that is a good thing to do. So your question has multiple answers depending on where your position is, which is the whole point of that, I don't know how to pronounce it, cinefin, I call it, the complexity thing. So there is no one answer to your question, is one answer to your question. And the guide is to be looking at value, his models and how they actually work, and be conscious of where the company itself is. Where are you as a company in these disruptive points? That would be my answer. I am an academic. A long answer that doesn't answer, but it is precise.
So by cinefin, you meant the complex and chaotic and
yes,
complicated and clear framework.
Yeah. I don't know if that was helpful, but this has been a strange meeting. I think he's a fascinating person, Mik is, and he has actually made a big contribution in our understanding. And he is well read, and there are so many books that are visible in his book as he's moving along. Unfortunately, we had the technological problems here and there, but I think we managed to get a flavor of the man himself.